Hi, I'm Anthony O'Flynn. I'm the Director of Holistic Yoga and Meditation. What is happiness? Well, we all know that happiness is a fundamental desire of all humans. We all want to be happy. We all want to have a happy life. As Deepak Chopra said, happiness is the goal of all other goals. So ultimately what we're seeking, our actions, we're actually wanting to be fundamentally happy. But we need to examine essentially what this happiness is. Today, many people live a life where they're trying to experience happiness by continually changing their external circumstances. This comes from the belief that happiness is something externally orientated, that a person can change their external environment and this will change their internal environment. Well, this isn't actually the case. By changing our internal environment, by definition, how we perceive our external environment changes, and therefore this is the real way to experience happiness, to transform what is happening internally, and therefore we experience our reality in a different way. The idea of changing things externally is simply a sugar-coated superficial hit, which we've all tried, but it doesn't produce lasting happiness, it doesn't produce deep peace, it is simply skirting on the surface, this superficial idea of candy-coated happiness. So what makes us happy? Is it money? Is it income? Well, there's been research directly into that idea of earning more money to make us happy. It has been revealed that a person earning $5,000 a year, and that has increased to $50,000 a year, their overall happiness is a dramatic increase. So therefore, obviously, if you are really suffering financially, you're homeless, you really don't have much money, your happiness is obviously going to be at a lower level. But $50,000, there's a dramatic increase. Here's the real interesting fact behind this research, is that when a person earns $50,000, going that scale increasing to $50 million, the increase of happiness is not dramatic. Therefore, this idea of money making as happiness, of producing happiness, simply is not true according to this research. So the more rich we become, there's a certain point where we are happy, we're fulfilled. Materially, there's a feeling of abundance, but beyond that, it doesn't actually produce more happiness. What about the idea of power? Well, Alexander the Great was one of the most famous men in history. He was one of the most powerful men in history. He was conquering countries in his 20s. He was one of the most powerful, wealthy men of all time. And yet Alexander the Great, one of his wishes when he died was, when I die, he wanted his coffin to have 2 holes cut so his hands could be seen visibly outside the coffin facing towards the sky. And when he was asked about this, he said, I wish the people to know that I came empty-handed into this world, and empty-handed I go out of this world. That means that all this power, these riches of this world, they're only transient. So, therefore, we have to look at this idea of happiness as essentially being an effect. It's the effect. What we need to examine is the cause. What causes happiness? Because when we know what the cause is, then we can produce the effect. So therefore, the fruit already exists in the seed. Wisdom, therefore, is essentially the ability to know the effect of a cause. So these building blocks of happiness are simply the cause. Happiness, the peace, the feeling of joy, the feeling of being at peace and happy, that's the effect. When we know the cause, we can produce the effect. So there's been a lot of research done into this. in psychology, particularly in the more modern positive psychology movement, that shows that there is this idea that we can produce happiness, but only when we know what the causes are. And that's why our happy living programs are based around the idea of the eight keys to happiness. So there are essentially 8 keys to happiness that's been backed up by research. So this means that we're able to have a resilient way of living. We're all faced with numerous challenges in our life. We all know what it's like for everything to be flowing, for everything to be going well. But when the challenges come, that's when we need to be resilient. That's when we need to have this quality of resilience so we can maintain this equanimity, this balance, this stability in times of challenge and adversity. We are going through great transformation on this planet. A lot of people experiencing challenges, but when we can be stable, when we can maintain this internal happiness, regardless of what's happening externally, we develop the quality of resilience, and there are a number of ways of developing this. So this means that we can produce happiness, we can amplify happiness in our being when we know the keys, these 8 keys to happiness. Some of these things include the body-mind connection. What is the relationship between our body and the mind? Our emotional quality, the quality of the mind, the purity of the mind. How can we transform lower emotions into positive emotions? The idea of neuroplasticity, the idea the brain is being plastic, that we can, or having this plastic quality, that we can mold it, we can change it through the wiring of the neurons. This famous saying that neurons that fire together wire together. So there are all these ideas of dealing with the inner critic. How can we create more self-acceptance? Self-acceptance is the basis of self-love. How can we deal with this inner critic that simply wants to criticize our internal being continually? How to develop more self-confidence. Happy people are always naturally more self-confident. How can we have more purpose in our life? What are we really living for? How can we have more passion in our life, more enthusiasm, more joy, this feeling of inner abundance, this feeling of the inner qualities of beauty, of peace, of inner harmony, and mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, to be present, to show up what's occurring in our life, to develop qualities of acceptance, presence, and of course, lifestyle issues around diet, which are ongoing. And there's always gratitude. One of the essential keys to a happy life is gratitude. It comes from the Latin grata, which means give or gift. It's essentially a way of giving thanks, and we all have so much to be grateful for. It's really the ability to see the sun instead of the clouds, and to focus on the positive things rather than the negative things in our life. And this feeling of gratitude is the simplest and one of the most effective ways of creating happiness spontaneously in the moment. Simply to be grateful, to give thanks. Thanks for watching. I wish all of you a happy life. As always, invest in your soul.